Hello and welcome to the John Nicolson YouTube channel. Well, dominating the headlines is the COVID inquiry report. We've been waiting a long time for it, and the results of the report are absolutely excoriating for Boris Johnson and the Conservative government. The report talks about an atmosphere of chaos and fear and division at the heart of Number 10. And reading the report, it just takes you back to those dark days, if you remember them, where we didn't know how bad it was going to be. We didn't know how many deaths there were going to be. There was a division between those people who said we must go into a lockdown and those people who said we can't go into a lockdown. And we were learning all the time, and the scientists were trying to advise us. We could not have had a worse Prime Minister for that period, where we needed somebody calm and sensible, hardworking and honest. We had somebody who was chaotic, dishonest, unfocused and lazy. And all the reports of the time and the reports subsequently, and now this report, showed that Boris Johnson didn't read the briefings, didn't understand what he was being told, didn't really care that he didn't understand what he was being told. We heard, for instance, from Dominic Cummings, his advisor, that Boris Johnson asked whether if you blew a hairdryer up your nose, that's what he asked, if you blew a hairdryer up your nose, would that kill off COVID? Imagine being led by somebody who's that intellectually lazy that he asked this as a serious question because he's seen something on the internet that suggested that this might be the solution. A bit like Donald Trump in the United Nations saying, if you injected bleach, would that kill off COVID? This is the problem with electing unserious people to serious high office. At times of national crisis, they simply can't cope. And we know from the results of the COVID inquiry, and this I think is the most damning figure, and this is what dominated all the headlines, that Baroness Hallett, who chaired the inquiry, the UK-England inquiry, said that 23,000 deaths she believed could have been avoided if we'd gone into lockdown 1 week earlier. Now, at the time that this was all going on, I was, in addition to being a Member of Parliament, I was doing a radio show on talk radio. And the useful thing about doing a radio show is that your producers, I had a great producer at the time, and your producers, actually the producer who produces this YouTube channel, can get the best experts on board to help you. And I remember talking to one particular expert, and he did an interview with me, and he said, he was a German doctor, and he said, we must go into lockdown now. If we continue to leave it, the deaths will escalate in the way that the deaths are escalating in Italy. We must go into lockdown now. And I went on social media and I repeated this, and I got so much abuse from people who said, we mustn't go into lockdown. And of course, what this inquiry shows us is that the scientists were right. We should have gone into lockdown earlier, and the politicians who are holding us back were entirely wrong. We also know that in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon was doing her best to get all 4 UK nations agreed that we would go into lockdown earlier, but Number 10 didn't want to do it. We also learned that there was a great suspicion between Number 10 and the devolved nations, in particular Scotland. Bluntly put, Nicola Sturgeon did not trust Boris Johnson, and of course she was right not to. She wanted to go into lockdown earlier, and the inquiry also rules that the only country in the UK that learned the lessons from the first lockdown was the Scottish Government in Edinburgh for the second lockdown, and that Number 10 was chaotic. There was a lack of urgency, the report rules, And they also say that that was inexcusable. And Scotland's cautious approach, we'll never know whether Scotland had adopted exactly the same approach throughout as the UK based in London. But Scotland's more cautious approach appears to have worked. It's vitally important that we learn the lessons from all of this. And another memory I have of this quite clearly is, and perhaps you remember this, that tabloids and Michael Gove kept attacking Nicola Sturgeon and said that she was trying to make political capital out of the differences between London and Edinburgh. Well, the inquiry specifically says that that wasn't true. They said that she was a serious leader at the time of crisis. She wasn't trying to make capital. She simply realised that she couldn't rely on Boris Johnson, and how right she was not to rely on him. Finally, I think this is what makes so many of us so angry and so bitter. And imagine the feelings of those who lost loved ones when they read about the 23,000 deaths. Do you remember the partying in number 10? People were dying. And in number 10, they were telling us that we shouldn't go out and meet people. They were telling us that if our aged relatives were alone in care homes, that we shouldn't go and see them. But in number 10, they were holding parties. They were drinking. Boris Johnson was toasting. And they lied about it. And they deceived us. And I think that's what makes people so angry and so bitter, that it was one rule for them and another rule for us. We've yet to hear the inquiry results from Scotland. We'll get those in due course. But there clearly have to be consequences for those named and shamed in the UK inquiry report. If Boris Johnson had the slightest shred of dignity, he would disappear completely from public life and bury himself in shame. I suspect that won't happen. Please do feel free to let me know what you think. I always welcome any comments you have. Please leave them below, and please subscribe. It's free to do so. And thank you for watching.